So the EU's landmark AI Act is officially on the books. But the real work is just getting started. How are its huge sweeping principles actually going to be turned into day-to-day practice? Well, this analysis, which was conducted under the scientific oversight of Professor Vihar Kiskinov, Doctor of Legal Science, is going to look at exactly that, the hidden engine that will shape the future of AI in Europe.
Right. We've all seen the headlines about the AI Act, but its passage brings up a really critical question. Now that this law exists, who's actually in charge of filling in all the blanks? Who decides what high risk really means in practice, or how the technical standards get enforced? That is the hidden machinery we are going to explore. Okay, here's our roadmap. First, we'll uncover the Act's hidden engine. Then, we're going to meet the surprisingly powerful system that runs it, a thing called Comitology. After that, we'll break down its two key procedures, look at the whole balance of power it creates, and finally, we'll connect all these dots to understand why this matters so much for the future of AI. Look, the AI Act passing into law was a massive media event for sure. But the real nitty-gritty work of shaping AI regulation in Europe, that's just getting underway. The law itself is more of a framework, and its practical application is going to be defined through a series of what are known as implementing acts.
And this is an absolutely crucial point. The Act gives or delegates power to the European Commission to amend what it calls non-essential elements. Now, this is smart because it allows the law to adapt as technology evolves without having to go back and rewrite the whole thing from scratch. It's designed for flexibility, but it also hands the Commission a ton of power to shape the law. And that kind of power, it needs a really robust system of checks and balances.
So, what is that system of checks and balances? Well, it's known by a rather strange name, Comitology. Sounds a bit weird, I know, but this is the core mechanism that governs how all those powerful implementing acts get created and controlled. In simple terms, Comitology is just a system of committees. Each EU country sends a representative, and these committees, well, they don't write the laws, but they keep a close watch on the Commission as it fills in all the details. It's really the main way the individual member states keep control over how EU law gets put into practice back home. And you should know, this isn't some informal get-together. It's all governed by a very specific law, Regulation 182/2011. You can think of this as the official rulebook for Comitology. It makes sure the process is consistent and predictable, whether the topic is agriculture or, as it is now, artificial intelligence. Now, inside this rulebook, there are two main paths a decision can take. And believe me, the difference between them is enormous. It all boils down to how much power the member states have to push back against the Commission. And they're called the advisory and the examination procedures. This table lays out the power dynamic perfectly. On the left, you've got the advisory procedure. Think of it as consultative. The Commission has to listen, but it still gets the final say. But on the right, the examination procedure gives member states significant control. Their opinion can actually be legally binding, which lets them block the Commission's proposals. And as you can guess, that path is saved for the more sensitive, high-stakes issues. Let's walk through the advisory procedure. First, the Commission drafts a rule. Then the Committee of Member States gives its opinion. The Commission is legally required to take the utmost account of what they say, but here's the kicker. Ultimately, it can still decide to go ahead and adopt the act anyway. It's a much more streamlined process, great for things like voluntary codes of conduct where you need a bit more flexibility. The examination procedure, though, is a whole different ballgame. Here, the committee doesn't just give an opinion, it holds a formal vote. And if the Commission can't get a qualified majority, which is a complex threshold based on both the number of countries and the population they represent, the act is blocked, dead in the water. This gives member states a real veto, and it's why this procedure is used for the really sensitive stuff, like defining how biometric data can be used in law enforcement. So, as you can see, this whole system creates a very delicate balance of power. It's designed to be a compromise, right, between the need for efficient EU-wide rules and the desire of national governments to stay in control. But, like any compromise, it comes with its own set of trade-offs. The pros are pretty clear. Involving the member states gives the whole thing democratic legitimacy and helps make sure rules are applied the same way everywhere. But the cons are pretty significant too. The process can be really complex, it can be slow, and it can be vulnerable to political horse trading. There's a constant risk of deadlock, where disagreements just grind the entire process to a halt. And this is not a new problem at all. As this quote points out, this tension between efficiency and control is a core feature of how the EU governs itself. The AI Act's implementation is just going to be the next chapter in this long-running story, balancing the need to move fast against the need for democratic oversight. What's really crucial here is that the AI Act doesn't exist in a vacuum. By using this same comitology system, the EU makes sure that its implementation lines up with other huge digital laws, like the GDPR for data privacy or the DSA for content moderation. It's all about creating one single, coherent regulatory world. Okay, so we've talked a lot about committees and procedures and regulations, but why does all this bureaucratic machinery matter so much when we're talking about AI? Well, because this is the exact point where the abstract principles of the law get turned into concrete, hard reality. How much of the AI Act do you think is dedicated to setting up this entire incredibly powerful system? It's just this many paragraphs. 2. Article 98 of the Act has only 2 short paragraphs, but those 2 paragraphs create the entire governance framework that will dictate how this law is put into practice. They are small, but their power is absolutely immense. This is the process that will literally define what high risk means. It's going to set the technical standards for AI safety and cybersecurity. It will determine the transparency requirements for AI models. Every single critical, practical detail of Europe's AI regulations will be hammered out in these committees through this exact process. And that really leaves us with one final big question. Is this complex, sometimes slow, and highly political process the right way to regulate a technology that moves at lightning speed? Or is this careful, democratic balancing act the only way to build a foundation for AI that we can truly trust? How Europe answers that question is going to shape all of our digital futures.